You are listening to a Freedom Student Ministry podcast.
You may remember this is the fourth week now we've been talking about parables of Jesus. So since we're talking about parables, you all remember what a parable is?
Story with purpose.
Story with a purpose, story with a point.
Earthly story with a heavenly purpose.
Earthly story with a heavenly purpose. And then it literally means putting alongside for the purpose of comparison. So it's a story that relates to something on this earth compared to something that's heavenly. And so what are some of the reasons Jesus used parables to try to get his point across? So if you're trying to explain electricity to somebody, something you can't see, feel, doesn't it help to have a story of something you can actually see and touch to explain it? So that's kind of what Jesus did, but he's trying to explain the kingdom of heaven. Well, we can't really see the kingdom of heaven, so he would use stories like the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is, like something else. And so he would use it to take something that's very abstract and hard to understand and tie it to something concrete so we could get a better grasp of it. And he also used parables to shock the audience. And the reason people remember a story if it has kind of a shocking point. If he takes something familiar and puts a little twist to it, something unexpected. So he would kind of shock the audience that way to make them think. And he also used it sometimes not to incriminate himself in front of the enemies. He could say some harsh things about some of the Jewish religious leaders but do it in a story, so it wasn't clear. So those were several of the reasons he spoke in parables. So tonight we're going to be looking at 3 parables that he told in succession, and they all have to do with something that is lost. Now, have you guys ever had lost something that's really important to you and spent a lot of time looking for it? Mm-hmm. Like, do we have an example?
My keys. Yeah.
What? Your phone?
Wallet.
Well, that's a big one.
Thank the Lord on that.
My dog.
My Bible.
Sometimes a dog wants to be lost, though. That's the thing about dogs. So I think our first overseas assignment was in Japan. And most other countries, they have coins for, like we have a dollar bill. Most other countries will have a coin for like $1. So in Japan, they had a coin for 100 yen, which is about $1. But they also had a coin for 500 yen, which is like $5. It's a big old coin like this. And I remember one day I was going into work, and we were in northern Japan. It snowed a lot there in the wintertime. And I was getting my keys out to get in the office, and I dropped a 500 yen in like 8 inches of new snow. So I did some time digging and scouring the snow to try to find my 500 yen, $5. So yeah, that's similar to what we're going to see in Jesus' parables about things that are lost and trying to find them. So we're going to be in Luke chapter 15. We're starting in verse 1.
9:36.
Yep. And we mentioned before, it's really important to Jesus' parables to know what the setting, the context is first, because that kind of sets up the story. So if I could I'll start with Rebecca. Could you read verses 1 and 2?
Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them."
Okay, so this is the setup, right? So he's hanging out with tax collectors and sinners, people that are kind of not the most well-respected in Jewish culture. And so the religious leaders see this and they complain, because here he is. So Jesus is equivalent to like a traveling rabbi. He travels around, he has disciples, he's teaching, and you would expect a traveling rabbi to be hanging out with the religious leaders and like the guys in the temple. But he's not doing that. He's hanging out with these notorious sinners that nobody else, and even traders. These tax collectors collected taxes for the Roman government. So they were muttering and complaining about this. So this is what sets up the parable. So Jesus tells them the first story. So Jen, if you could read verses 3 through 7.
Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Does he not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And then when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and gets home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent.
So what's interesting in this first story, he tells the story of the sheep, and then in the last verse, he tells what it means, right? So what, anybody want to give a quick summary? What does this parable about a lost sheep mean? Yeah, go
Is
Lisa.
the lost sheep supposed to be us?
Yeah, he talks about that lost sinners. And once he finds it, there's rejoicing in heaven. So let me, since we have three parables of things that are lost, I want to kind of lay them out on a chart to help see them all. So in the first one, the lost sheep, what is God represented by?
Shepherd.
The shepherd. And how many sheep were lost? One.
You're right.
Out of how many?
Right.
So 1 out of 100 sheep. And what was so the shepherd left all 99 behind. He left 99 under 10 and went looking for the one lost one. And what was the reaction when the sheep was found?
Joy.
Yeah, there was like a party going on, so rejoicing. That's a J. So in this story, we learn about God being a shepherd, leaving 99 behind to go to find the one lost sheep. What does this tell us about God's character?
He pursues us.
Yeah, kind of like that reckless love song. And it's interesting because even though he has 99 that are in the fold, he still wants to go after that one. And it kind of reminds me of a verse, I think it's in 1 Peter, it says, God is not willing that any should perish, but all to come to repentance. So he's very patient and long-suffering because he doesn't want to lose a single one of us. He wants all of us in his kingdom. I was going to say, not willing to lose one.
Yeah.
So he continues to build. So he has three parables. The first one's the lost sheep. 100 sheep, one is lost. The shepherd goes to find it. The next parable is about a lost coin, kind of like my 500 yen. So, Austin, since you're right there, can you read verses 8 through 10?
The parable of the lost coin. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of angels of God over the sinners who repent.
Okay. Here's another story that he tells us the meaning again at the very end. Sounds kind of like the first one, right? This time it's a woman. She has 10 coins. She loses one. She scours the house. She lights a lamp, scours the house to find that one coin. Even though she had the 9 others, she couldn't let that one get away. And when she finds it, this is kind of unusual. She calls her friends over to have this party because she found one last coin. And then he says in verse 10, this in the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. So, similar story, kind of the same point. So in this story, who's God represented by?
The lady.
Yep. So he's just this woman. And what did she lose? 1 out of 10 coins. And the reaction when she found it?
Party at the
Yep.
close.
Yes.
And what does that tell us about God's character?
Likes to party.
He is so happy when one sinner repents. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. In this one, he's scouring the house, to find this one lost coin.
Oh, that's good.
So he scours the earth, searching for that one lost sinner. Even though he's still got the other 9 coins, that's not good enough. He wants to get that last one. And then the last parable is kind of a lengthy one. It's a parable of the lost son, and some have probably heard of it, the prodigal son. And this story is not quite as simple as the sheep and the coin. There's another nuance to it. A couple points he makes with this story. So let me read the first section of it, just verses 11 through 16. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told him this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now, before you die." So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. So the son, and just to explain what this meant in this culture, son says, "Father, I want my inheritance now." And normally the way they divided the inheritance, when the father died, the oldest son would get a double portion, and the younger son would get 1 portion. So in this case, the older son would get 2/3 of the estate, the younger son would get 1/3. But his father's estate, he doesn't have like money in the bank. His money is in his land and in his livestock. So the son is basically saying to his father, "You're as good as dead to me. I want my inheritance now." And his father, instead of disciplining or chastising his son, he sold off 1/3 of his estate and gave it to his son. So this is shocking to the audience, first of all. So he sells off the stuff, gives it to his son, and then his son decides, "I'm going to take off to a distant land with this." And being a good Jewish boy, he goes off to some Gentile nation somewhere and wastes all of his father's estate. And he finds himself basically living in a pig pen, eating what the pigs are eating. So he said he became so hungry, he was even feeding what the pigs ate looked good to him. So what does this tell you about the father? I mean, this doesn't sound like a normal father would probably react to his son.
Gracious.
Yeah. His father gave his son a lot of free reign, right? Allowed him to kind of go his own way, do what he wanted to do.
It didn't withhold anything.
No?
I think it speaks to free will. He allowed that younger son to have free will
Yeah.
over his life.
Kind of God get sun in your face there. I think God does that with us a lot too. I mean, He'll let us go our own way, and but consequences catch up to us. It's not God punishing. God didn't send him into the pig pen. I mean, that's just the consequences of his actions led him there. But then he had this epiphany. So Mark, if you could read verses 17 through 24.
When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son...
Hold on there. Stop right there. Yep. Okay. So the son comes up with a plan, right? Hey, at least my servants are fed better than I am in this pig pen. I will go home to be one of my father's servants. Now, how would you expect the father to react after his son took a third of his estate and wasted it?
Partially.
Yeah. Maybe not welcome his son home at all. And I think the son was having a little trepidation too because he had to prepare the speech to tell his father, Father, please, I'm a sinner, just let me be your servant. But instead, it says that the father sees him from a long ways away, and the father actually ran out to meet him. And in this culture, an older man doesn't run. I mean, this kind of shows the reckless love of God, like we sang about. And so that would have been shocking to Jesus' audience to hear that the father ran to meet the son. And the son gave his rehearsed speech about, I've sinned against you, I've sinned against heaven, I just want to be a servant. And he welcomes him back as his son. And to show that, his father, well, he threw a party. But what else did he give the son? In verse 22, 23.
22, a
Yeah.
ring for his finger.
Yeah. So that's
sandals
probably
for
like,
his feet,
yeah.
robe.
Yeah. So this is probably like his father's signet ring, which is used for signing things. Like he could have the authority now of his father. You know, he's not only welcome back, but he's welcome back to be, have that same authority as his father. And this father's best robe, sandals on his feet. Servants would have no shoes, but the son's going to wear shoes. So he put sandals on his feet. And then he throws this big party to celebrate his son that had returned. So what does this tell you about the father now?
He's forgiving.
Yes, he's forgiving. Has great love for his son. And so far, how is this story a little bit different than the first two parables we read? Because the son was lost.
Oh, the son came back.
Yeah, so this one's a little different. So instead of the father going and trying to find his son, he allowed his son to leave. But then when his son made the decision to come back, he welcomed him and as part of the family again. But then remember, this son also has an older brother. I wonder what his reaction is. So verses 25 through 30, I'll read these. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. Your brother is back, he was told, and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fatted calf. What's that? I thought I heard a couple of you say something. I just wanted to sit something lazy.
I just said shots fired.
Okay. Yeah. So what is basically the older brother's reaction? What do you think he's feeling, you that have siblings? What?
Jealousy.
Jealousy.
Upset.
Angry.
It's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Isn't that what it sounds like?
Yeah.
So I'm sure that, can you guys sympathize with the older little brother a little bit? Have you been in that situation?
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of being happy for his brother being, he didn't even call it his brother. He said, he told his father, your son. He couldn't even say brother. He was so upset, and he could not. He couldn't even go into the room and celebrate that his brother had returned. And so then the father tries to explain in verses 31 and 32. His father said to him, "Look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found." So the father tries to explain and console his son. Hey, he was lost. He's back home safe again. And a little bit of a trick question. How did the older brother respond after his father told him that? We don't know, because Jesus leaves it hanging right there. Because you remember who the audience is. The audience is these religious leaders that can't tolerate Jesus being around sinners. So he's kind of left it hanging for his audience to respond, because they're essentially the older brother in the story. So let me try to chart this up here now with the other two parables. So who is God represented by in this story? The Father. And what did the father lose?
His son.
How many sons did he have?
2.
And when he found the son returned, what happened?
They partied.
Yeah.
Feast.
Fattened calf. And I've read too, when they kill like a fatted calf or a large animal like that, there's no refrigeration in that country, right? So it's just not a little family gathering. You have to invite all the friends and neighbors over, because that's going to spoil, so you have to eat it right then. So it's a huge celebration. And so what does this story tell us about God's character? Yes, he's definitely forgiving. But what did we say about the first part of it, where we kind of let the son take off?
Gives us free will.
Yeah. So he lets us go our own way. But are we ever too far away, too far gone that he won't accept us back? No. So in all the stories, there was one thing that was lost, but there was also the sheep, the coins, and the older brother that were still at home, like those religious leaders he was hanging out with. So there's really 2 points for us out of this story. And the first one is, if you're not already a Christ follower, if you haven't accepted Christ, if you're not a Christian, Jesus is actively searching for you, just like the shepherd. Even though he's got 99 sheep at home, he's still searching for you, that lost one, like searching for that lost coin. He's like that father ready for you to come back. And then for maybe another group of you, if you're already a Christ follower, maybe you're in that, like that older brother, and you develop an attitude about or resentful for who Jesus may be seeking. And so you need to have kind of an attitude adjustment. So those are the 2 things I want you to consider and ponder tonight. Are you that lost thing that Jesus is searching for? Are you the older brother that, has a problem with jealousy and anger? And when we conclude here, go downstairs. If you want prayer, Jen and I are going to stay up here behind to pray with anybody who wants prayer. But to finish this up, I'm going to lead us in a closing prayer. God, just thank you for revealing your character to us tonight, Lord. Just what a seeker you are, God. You don't want to lose any of us. You want us all. Lord, just thank you for continuing to seek and never give up, Lord. And I just pray for those who are considering turning to you that they would do that tonight. Because you're a loving God, you're a forgiving God. You're a God of second chances. And we just thank you and praise you for that being your character. In Jesus' name, amen.
You have been listening to a Freedom Student Ministry podcast.